Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. Now I know that none of you ever watch these videos for production values, but nevertheless I feel the need to apologise today because I'm going to have to do the entirety of this video kneeling down because I've broken my desk chair. No idea how to fix it either, but there's someone coming to fix the dishwasher in a couple of hours time because that's broken as well, and hopefully he'll be able to sort it. I mean, I imagine dishwashers and desk chairs are maybe the same skill set. Also, what do you reckon? Big hand or small coffee? This is actually really uncomfortable. Anyway, this video is sponsored by Lumix, and these are all my Lumix lenses, which I love. They're like my little, I was going to say babies, but that's a bit odd, so they're not like my babies. Nevertheless, these are the lenses that I use to do my job and make my videos. And I thought I'd go through the process today of what I've learned over the years from buying lenses. Because if you've tried to do it before, you might have noticed that, I mean, you start off really, really excited. You're like, oh, I'm gonna get a new lens! Ah! And then you're kind of a bit less excited, and then a bit less excited than that, and then a little bit less excited than that. And then you start stressing a little bit, and then you get really stressed, and then you panic, and then you start crying. At least in my experience. And you know, it should be a joyous thing buying something like a new lens, but it's not all the time because lenses are very difficult things to buy, and that's because they don't really exist on their own. You know, you don't buy a lens to use on its own. You buy it to use with a camera for a start, but also to use with your other lenses. And to find something that kind of fits and complements all your other lenses and your cameras and just your kit overall, and to work out an amount of money to spend on it that represents good value, and to work out how much you're going to use it, to look at all the reviews and the test shots and the graphs and the stats and all that kind of stuff, after a while it gets a bit daunting, I find. So yeah, I thought I'd just share some little nuggets that I've picked up over the years, or considerations, if you will, that I like to employ when I'm trying to work out if I should buy a new lens or not. So that's what this video is. Now, the first thing to say about lenses is that you may have come across the concept of good, fast and cheap. Pick two. Now, this works for loads of stuff, but it works particularly well for lenses because fast can mean wide apertured, which fits quite nicely into this thing. So if you've not come across this concept before, basically you have to pick between fast, good and cheap, and you can only ever have two. So if you have a good fast lens, then it won't be cheap. And if you have a good cheap lens, then it won't be fast. And if you have a cheap fast lens, then it won't be good. And that rule applies most of the time, I found. And when I started out in photography, that was pretty much my entire framework for trying to work out if a lens was good value and therefore if I should buy it or not. In the years since then, I've kind of learned a few other things that I should take into consideration, and yeah, I'll run through them now. Starting with weight. Now, if you've followed this channel for a while, you'll know that I bang on about weight all the time, but if you're a photographer like me, weight is a big, big deal because I tend to go up mountains and through forests and kind of walk around all day with everything that I have with me on my back. So in order to kind of come back with working shoulders, I have to limit the amount of stuff I take, or the weight of the stuff that I take. And given that I do photo and video, typically I have two camera bodies, a G85 and a G9. These 6 lenses. Are there 6 here? Yeah, I have these 6 and the wide angle lens that I'm filming this on, so 7 lenses. A drone, obviously loads of batteries, a drone controller, water, food, extra layers, tripod, begrudgingly, filters, maps, probably other things I'm forgetting, but a lot of stuff. Microphones. And that means that you come to a point where it's just too heavy and you start taking stuff out of the bag, which is something that I absolutely used to do. So I'd spend loads of money on expensive lenses, only to find that a couple of months after buying them, I'd start kind of taking them out of my bag before I left the house and leaving them on the kitchen table, which is, well, I mean, that just means you've got loads of expensive glass that you're not utilising sat on your kitchen table, obviously. So my suggestion here is simple. Basically, everybody, when it comes to lenses and all kinds of camera equipment, everybody has a financial budget. My suggestion to you is that you have a weight budget as well, which is something that I think people are becoming less and less aware of because more and more people are buying online. So lenses are very tactile things. They're made to be held, they're made to be carried places typically, they're made to go on the front of your camera and to be kind of supported by your hand. They're basically made to be touched. And more people are buying lenses without ever going through that process because they don't go into a shop and have a feel of the lens and get a sense of how big it is and how much it weighs and all that kind of stuff. Which means that people buy lenses now, me included sometimes, not really knowing what it's actually like in real life and how much it weighs. And if you don't have a sense of how much you're willing to carry in terms of weight for a typical photo trip, whatever that is for you, then that could lead to doing what I used to do, which is kind of slowly removing stuff and just not using it, convincing yourself that you don't need to use that particular lens on that particular day, which is just pointless. So yeah, having a weight budget, trying to work out what you're happy to carry for your typical trips is a good start, because that gives you basically a weight budget, as I said. So you'll be able to work out what you can afford in terms of weight when you're looking for new lenses. Or you might decide that you have to get rid of old ones or something else. Tripod, maybe. Consideration number 2 is versatility. So this little 42.5 lens, for example, is a brilliant little portrait lens. It's got a full frame equivalent focal length of 85, so perfect for portraits and stuff, particularly in low light because it's f1.7. But it also focuses really, really closely, which means that I can use it for detail shots. I mean, it's not a full-on macro lens, but it's good at doing that kind of stuff. All of which means that this is multi-talented. This has 2 uses for me at least. And anytime you can find that in a lens, that's absolutely gold, because ultimately that saves me carrying like potentially a macro lens around with me and spending money on a macro lens. So perfect. Now the important thing with versatility is that versatility is very much personal. It depends all on you. So for example, this is my 12 to 35, so in a full frame equivalent is 24 to 70, so pretty much as boring as lenses come really in terms of focal range and what it can do, but an absolute workhorse and essential to professional photographers. Now this is versatile to me because it has a constant aperture of 2.8, so right the way through the focal range I can keep this at 2.8, so if I'm in low light or I want a relatively shallow depth of field, this is gold to me, and this spells versatility. For other people though, it might not. So for other people, this lens might be more versatile because this is a 12 to 60, so this has nearly double the focal range, but it's not constant aperture, which means that if you zoom in, the widest aperture closes, which is not great for video and not great if you want to maintain a shallow depth of field. So to me, the shorter focal length is more versatile than the one with a greater focal range. And yeah, to other people that might be different. So it's important to understand your shooting needs before you try and kind of gauge versatility based on other reviews and stuff. Ah, my knees are hurting now. Consideration number 3 is the point of diminishing returns, which I've spoken about on this channel before. So let's say, for example, you spend £500 on a lens. Chances are you're going to get quite a good lens. If you were then to buy a lens that was £1,000, you would end up probably, all things being equal, with a lens that was better in some way than the £500 lens. However, the chances of that lens being twice as good, I would say, are slim. I'd suggest the probability is that the second £500 of the £1,000, you're getting less bang for your buck. And that's the point of diminishing returns. As you spend more and more money, you get less for each pound or dollar. So Lumix, for example, make 2 25mm lenses, so 50mm equivalents in full frame. They make this, which is the 25-1.4 collaboration with Leica, and they also make a 25mm 1.7. Now I use this focal range a lot. I use it for stills and for video extensively, which means that I decided that for my uses it was worthwhile to spend more money, get a slightly heavier lens and get the 1.4. However, this 42.5, this is also one of 2 lenses that Lumix make at this focal length, and I decided to go for the cheaper one. So this is the 1.7. There is also a 1.2, which is much bigger, heavier and more expensive. And the reason I decided to go for this one is that I don't shoot at this focal length all that often. And so for me, it wasn't worth the extra expense and the extra weight. And also, had I had the 1.2 in my bag, the heavy 1.2, let's say it's this size. It's been a while since I've seen one, but it might not be. But I might have decided, because I don't shoot at that focal length all that much, that if I don't think I'm going to see anything on a shoot that requires it, then I just leave it at home. With this, I don't have to do that because, I mean, look at it, it's really not a weight penalty, which means that if I come across something that this lens is perfect for, I have it. If I had the 1.2, I wouldn't. So yeah, that's a big consideration too. Point of diminishing returns. How much do you actually need? Other stuff. Yes, real-world tests. In my experience, it's much better to value real-world tests versus the kind of tests that happen in labs and show you graphs and things of distortion and corner softness and all that kind of stuff. I much prefer to see actual photos demonstrating the strengths and weaknesses of a lens because I find it much easier to try and work out how that will play out in my own work. So for example, if you've got a lens that's rated as quite soft in the corners when you've got really wide apertures, if you can actually see the examples of that, then you can work out that typically you're never really going to have subjects in your photos right in the corners, so you might decide it doesn't matter. Similarly, if you see examples of distortion, you might decide that that's no big deal for you because you rarely shoot in places with straight lines, for example. And when I first started buying lenses, I paid too much attention to the lab tests that showed kind of the graphs of things like distortion, as I said. And it would discourage me from buying lenses that weren't perfect, which meant I spent far too much money and far too much time procrastinating and saving up basically for lenses that I actually didn't really need. I could have just got the cheaper options because in reality, for my style of work, they would have been fine. So yeah, real world tests and looking at actual images is a much better thing to do, I think, than looking at graphs. You can do that on all kinds of websites. Places like Flickr often have groups for particular lenses, or even lots of kind of blogs and review places now. They'll show you pictures and even comparisons against other lenses. And personally, certainly in my experience, that's much more useful than graphs. Consideration number 5 is build quality. Now, you have to consider, I guess, to some extent, how clumsy you are and where you live, I would suggest. For example, I am incredibly clumsy and therefore I'm prone to dropping things and throwing things into my bag when I should probably place them into my bag. Now these lenses, pretty much all the lenses that I have are super rugged, particularly these zooms. They're also weather sealed, which is crucial if you live in the UK, otherwise you're going to end up missing shots and panicking when you get drops of water on your lens. Some of these aren't weather sealed, so this 25, this is a few years old now in terms of design. I've only just got it myself, but it's a few years old, and this isn't weather sealed, so I'd have to take that into account. But having rugged, professional build quality, you might decide is not important to you if you're careful and you live in the desert. But for me, it's a really big deal. So it may well be to you. It may well be a thing worth paying more for. Consideration number 6 is to buy slowly. So it's tempting if you ever end up in a situation where you can do this. I mean, I never have, but I've heard of people that have, where you maybe sell all of your gear from one system and want to straight away invest in another, for example. Or you just come into a load of money and just want to buy a system up from scratch. And in that situation, I think it'd be tempting to just build your dream list of lenses and go for it straight away. Just pull the trigger, buy all of them immediately. And I would advise against doing that because each lens has its own characteristic, and you may find when you slowly build up your lens collection that actually you don't need things that you thought you would need. So for example, if you were moving to micro four thirds and you had concerns that shallow depth of field was going to be difficult to achieve, and therefore you wanted to get a zoom, but you also wanted to get a prime to make sure that you could stop down further than you could with a zoom. You may find after time, if you were to just get the zooms in the first place, that you're actually quite happy with the depth of field, in which case you'll save yourself the money and the weight. I mean, it's not really much weight, but you get what I mean. Just an example. Yeah, buy things slowly rather than rushing into buying things all at once, I would say. And consideration number 7 is the focal lengths themselves. So I have a pretty wide range of focal lengths here. I mean, from my 8 to 18 that I've got on the camera now to my 35 to 100, I can cover 16 to 200 millimeters full frame equivalent, which is pretty much all I need. If you're unsure what you need, then you need to spend more time shooting. Basically, that's the only way to find out if you're missing out on focal lengths or apertures that you think you could benefit from. Looking at other people's work and trying to work out what kind of focal lengths we use for that can be helpful too. Again, you can do that on places like Flickr, 500px, all those kinds of sites. But yeah, shooting more is a great way to kind of work out what focal lengths you benefit from most, what kind of most of your keepers are shot at, and what other focal lengths you might need in order to get other kinds of photos that you think would make your shooting better. Yeah, that's a fairly broad list of considerations to think about when you're buying lenses. I can't feel my knees anymore. This really hurts. I'm going to have to fix that chair. If you can think of any more considerations of things you should think about when you're trying to buy lenses, do please leave them in the comments for other people and myself to learn from. That would be very helpful. Thank you very much for watching. What else is there? I think that's it. I've got a lot of work to do today. I'm going to have to kneel for all of it. This is going to be hell. Thank you for watching. Oh.